I wanted to thank especially Elizabeth and Kellie, who joined us when we were not able to come to Guelph and we were doing our virtual events. And so for all of those that attended those events, thank you for helping us keep the conversation going. So it's funny when we start these events, this has always been my placeholder for, it's like, when I come up with a better title, I'll put it in there. But this one just kind of stuck with me, and it was funny. I was talking to Indy, who's with the Signified team, and has been a great speaker, and kind of one of our thought leaders. And he was like, "Well, I assume the first question is going to be, what happened, and what have you guys learned, and where are we going from here?" And I was like, "Well, that's kind of what we always start our title off with." So what I thought I'd do is, let Angela, Zach, Kellie, and Elizabeth introduce themselves. And then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation here. As I mentioned, we're capturing all of this on video. We put so much time and effort into these pieces of content that we want them to kind of live on. And we'll get them up on our YouTube page. If you guys could like our YouTube channel, that means we can actually name it something. But anyways, Angela, I'm going to let you go. Say a quick hello. I typically ask folks to just tell us a little bit about your experience, where you are now, the markets that you guys are selling in, and how you sell into those markets. And then we'll move on to some other questions.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Angela Clark. I am the head of digital studio at Patagonia. Relatively new to that role, so I think in our conversations I'll be talking a little bit about my former brand, which was True Religion, but I'm currently at Patagonia, 8 weeks in, actually. So my job there is a newly created role to really help the brand move, I used to call it from analog to fully digital in a lot of ways, because as you can imagine, they're a brand who wants to move fast, wants to move responsibly. So there's always that tension between growth and responsibility. So my role is really to kind of paint that vision, and I'm going to use the word strategy. I guess I'm an amateur too.
We're all amateurs, yes.
And kind of help develop that for the organization. So it's a really exciting time for me, and my whole career has been in e-com and retail. But domestically, from a global brand, we have pilot offices in Europe, based in Amsterdam, in Japan, and then we also have an office in Latam, Mexico.
Got it. Zach, you want to say a quick hello? Zach and Angela are both kind of newbies to the stage, and Zach hauled it all the way across the country to join us, so big special thanks for coming and joining us. Tell us a little bit about your story, where you guys are selling internationally.
Yeah, I'm Zach Goldstein. I'm the CEO and founder of Public Rec. I started the brand about 7 years ago. We're based in Chicago, but we sell kind of everywhere, mainly through our website. We partnered with Global E about 2 years ago, and so we're kind of selling everywhere. Canada, the UK, Germany, Australia, those are some of our bigger countries. But yeah, international makes up about 10 to 15% of our revenue, and it's been a growing business for us.
Awesome, thanks. Kellie?
Hi, good morning. I'm Kellie Swanton, VP of International at Reformation. Reformation's a sustainable fashion brand based in Los Angeles. Fairly young company, founded in 2009. Really the purpose of bridging the gap between sustainability and fashion. We are majority direct-to-consumer and majority e-commerce. We have about 30 owned retail locations globally, and then a handful of wholesale partnerships as well, but the majority of our revenue definitely comes from e-commerce. And on the international front, we also ship with globally cross-border. Some of our largest markets are similar, so the UK, Canada, Australia, among others. And then we also have kind of a growing retail store footprint, really aimed at helping prop up that e-commerce business.
Great, and the interesting thing, I was talking to Kellie, she's like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of in charge of all the international stores now too. And it's kind of like, wait a second, wasn't it the other way around not too long ago? So we'll get back to that later. Elizabeth?
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Krause. I'm VP for Pentland Brands North America, Speedo in particular. I'm in charge of everything from Amazon marketplaces to DTC e-com, as well as brand marketing, with my primary focus on Speedo. And Speedo, which most people have a particular product come to mind, is actually the world's #1 swimwear brand and is founded from Bondi Beach, Australia. Our headquarters is out of the UK now. We have a North American office here in Cypress, California. And we're in a unique situation right now because we just completed a reacquisition of Speedo's largest market, which is North America, back into the global fold. So in the middle of COVID, navigated a complete systems restructure and then had to dive straight in, no pun intended, to how do we figure out how to digitize across multiple geos and bring and reunify the world's largest swimwear brand. So that was a lot.
Well, thank you so much. So we're going to jump into the before and after. So, you know, it was really interesting just to kind of, again, think back to where we were. I mean, this was one of the last events before kind of the world shut down. And, you know, of course, we all knew about the huge e-commerce boom and then all the challenges with fulfilling demand. So, Angela, I'll start with you. When we were talking, you know, my little word cloud with the returns and the re-energize, these guys were all like super re's. I guess that's a word. But yeah, tell us a little bit about True Religion, because you were kind of like, we're kind of returning to global. And I think that's you know, the reality is we've seen a lot of people have to put global, not to the side, but they just had to prioritize domestic. I mean, you know, especially back in the heart of it, it was, you know, in-store pickup, curbside pickup, and just getting the team together and dealing with all the craziness going on in the DCs and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit about kind of how you guys came out of the pandemic and what were the lessons learned.
Yeah, so for True Religion, during the pandemic, we kind of were hit with everything. So obviously, like everyone else, we had to furlough people. We went into bankruptcy 2 months into that, and so e-com was really the lifeline, literally, of the brand at that time. So not only, you know, we were already kind of refocusing our digital international business. So we used to have dedicated URLs for Canada and UK, our 2 biggest international markets, and we actually truncated those because we were looking for places to save money. So we thought we would use a third party to help build those businesses, use less resources internally. We had warehouses in both the UK and Canada. And we did close the Canada warehouse and was planning to close the UK warehouse, even though there were a few stores still in the UK. So that all happened right before the pandemic. So then when the pandemic happened and we went into bankruptcy and all those things, we had even fewer resources. So the reality is we just put that on autopilot, which really did not work that well. So, so we kind of left like that business on crutches. We did lose a little bit of ground from the revenue we were expecting to do. I actually had plans to scale international, but with everything else that we were doing, we just didn't have capacity to really pay much attention to it, which I think, you know, it doesn't feel good to say, but I think that's reality that a lot of people really live through. So coming out of the pandemic, it was like, okay, now we need to really revisit that. And so we also learned that the third party that we relied on was really challenging for us. We didn't have really great easy access data that we could action on quickly, a lot of visibility. We didn't have the ability to give really localized experiences like I was hoping to. So we decided to look for a new partner. So that was something that we actually transitioned right before I left True Religion, to find someone who could give us localized marketing in country, localized pricing that was more exact. I had so many UK people call me and say, when someone's on Instagram, they're seeing the US price and it's half of what we're selling in the UK. How am I supposed to sell this stuff? I get calls all the time. So I was like, that was my #1 solve. If I could solve that, I was doing well. So, you know, a lot of unique challenges there that we really had to kind of focus on. And so now the foundation has been set to kind of really focus on that again, like you said, and re-energize that business because it is still a huge opportunity. The brand is really well recognized as really a premium brand, like a lot of American brands overseas. It has a much more premium status than here in the US. So wanting to honor that. It was one of the best-selling brands in suffrages, which is a little shocking when you think about where it's positioned here in the US.
It's That's the beautiful thing about international. It's not just the cookie cutter world, things are so different. Elizabeth, I know when we were talking, in fact, you had a couple of my favorite quotes, but the whole idea of the hyper-localized regional teams coming out of the pandemic. Tell us, a little look back. I know a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, and we'll cover some more, later on in the panel discussion, but yeah, tell us how things are going.
Yeah, it's really great. It's been pretty fascinating and a unique situation. Sounds like everybody's situation's been kind of unique over the past 2 years, though. So for us, again, North America had been the largest region, but had been owned separately. At Q4 of last year, we completed a top-to-bottom reintegration with the original parent corporation, who had been operating Speedo out of the UK for rest of world, everything outside of North America, for quite a number of years. So there was duplication of teams, duplication of roles, and we had just been coming off of all of our North American systems onto theirs, so there was new ways of working. How do we get things done? Alignment of go-to-market processes and schedules, seasonality, line architecture, sizing, everything. And couple it with the fact that the North American team was in a very different position with regard to social commerce, ambassadors, community building, versus perhaps some of the other teams. So one of the things that I was really excited about was the receptivity of the parent corporation to basically not have to micromanage or control every role, and the pretty quick and immediate recognition that you can't have duplication of every role and be efficient. So we pivoted pretty quickly. The underlying theme here, read between the lines, very lean teams.
Right.
So there wasn't a horrible amount of red tape to cut through, but we all worked together very amicably and kind of block and tackled about who could lead on the social playbook, who's going to be taking CRM, how are we going to be approaching alignment of promotional strat and commercial calendars between the regions and the cultures. And so we did land on kind of this hyper-regionalized global team that was just really opportunistic. We were all in Zoom, we're all in Microsoft Teams anyway. So whether our sports marketing team was in Arizona, our social team in New Jersey, or our CRM and email marketing teams in London, it didn't matter. We worked it out. Some of the other things we were able to do is, for lack of a better term, really opportunistically create e-com SMU exclusives by just opening up the product lines for the different regions. In the United States, we got on the phone and called our Hong Kong team and said, I really love your boating capsule and what you're doing over there and the storytelling digitally that you're doing around it. Can I pony on your buy and bring it into the United States? And we were really fortunate to have a culture of, to sum it up, kindness and support. So our sourcing teams, our logistic teams said, sure, whatever you want, we'll figure it out. We haven't done it before, we'll make it work. So last year alone, we launched a capsule from Hong Kong that we called Tokyo Tech that was actually celebrating what was originally supposed to be the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games in 21 with a capsule. And then we did Shades of Slay, which was actually just buying off of our UK line for an SMU capsule. And now everybody's doing it in different regions off of the North American line. So it's been really exciting, unforeseen, fluid, but really positive.
So yeah, when I was thinking the whole kind of leadership slide, it's like kindness is what I should have said, because it's really the kind leader is the best leader these days. Zach, both of these are pretty well-known global brands. You guys are an up-and-coming global brand, and I was talking to Rick, and he, again, thanks for doing the podcast. He was our first podcast interview of our first podcast at Guelph, LA. Tell us a little bit about, kind of how things impacted you guys. I mean, talk about lean teams. I'm sure you guys had some lean opportunities, so to speak.
Yeah, we were a small team when it started, and we were fortunate we didn't have to lay off people at the time, and right when it hit, of course, March and April, we saw a significant drop off on our site, and there was a lot of panic around, we can't survive if the numbers continue to look like this. Fortunately, we started to see things pick up. I don't think I described the brand in my first answer, but we're a leisure apparel brand, and so a lot of our product, we were fortunate, was still relevant, and our fulfillment center stayed open, which most of our business was already through our site. We didn't have a lot of retail exposure, and so, throughout 2020 and 2021, business has been growing. Last year in particular, the supply chain was incredibly challenging for us. We had our main factory closed for a couple months, and so that affected inventory and being out of stock. But in general, we're fortunate that we've hired throughout and grown the team, and we're still very lean. We're sub 20 employees, but we've been able to scale the business, kind of focusing on growing just through the website. We have a couple stores. We're growing wholesale, but in general, most of the business is coming through our site, which has afforded us the opportunity to stay lean as a business. And
So any kind of markets, that was one thing, and we'll talk a little bit about it in the next section, actually, just this idea that, there's a lot of testing that went on. Any markets surprise you, or did the pandemic just kind of, the tier ones that I mentioned, I showed some data earlier. Any kind of markets that you guys, found to be pleasant surprises?
I think something we've experienced somewhat more recently, which maybe we should have been more thoughtful about this earlier on, but just thinking about, a significant portion of our business is driven through selling pants, and so it's a colder weather item typically, and so thinking about, we can market to Australia during our winter, selling them shorts, and so affecting some of the seasonality and, helping make the business smoother. We've seen a lot of success basically marketing a product we otherwise wouldn't have ads marketing, just because we typically aren't selling shorts over the winter for our business. So that's been a nice bump and a nice change for us, is thinking about what is the right product based on what the country is and what their climate is based on time of the year.
Great. And Kellie. Kellie, again, has been just an invaluable source to us over the years. I mean, we love it anytime somebody has like VP of International. Unfortunately, some of those titles you'll see are going away, and they're becoming more expansive and things like that. But tell us a little bit about, kind of what you guys have been doing. I know when we talked on the virtual summit, you guys were seeing opportunities to extend into new product lines, kind of along the lines of what Elizabeth was talking about. So, yeah, how did you guys come out of it, and where do we go now?
Yeah, it's been a non-linear journey, but we really started focusing on international really just a year before the pandemic started. So our focus pre-pandemic was, we had a fairly robust roadmap, I would say. In addition to Europe and Canada, which really were kind of our larger markets, had big ambitions for APAC as well. But a big piece of our strategy was always to really go market by market and figure out how to adapt our brand to the specific market and make sure that it resonated well. And so when the pandemic hit, travel halted, we really didn't have the opportunity to do that anymore. So really had to kind of step back and, to use your word from earlier, refocus on kind of our tier one markets from an international perspective. So that was really, the English-speaking markets where we already kind of had investments in place that we could double down on. It also gave us the opportunity to revisit our consumer preferences and how they were changing. And we really saw that at a global level, but I think we're primarily woven dresses brand, and people weren't going on vacation anymore, they were staying home. So we needed to figure out how can we kind of stay relevant, how can we still be kind of a go-to brand for our consumer. And so we introduced loungewear quite quickly. We introduced activewear, which were really successful kind of pivots for us, and really fortunate that we were able to do that to kind of buoy our business. But thankfully, about a year in, or maybe call it mid-2021, we definitely saw that demand come back for our core products. I think, again, just staying really close to the customer, ear on the ground, and listening to them. What we heard was we still want to, dress the way that we always have. Yes, it's slightly different now, but, I think it would have been a mistake to make an assumption about needing to kind of pivot that strategy altogether. We need to kind of stay true to our brand DNA. So again, by employing that hyper focus on the customer, we were able to kind of avoid some of those pitfalls and really kind of come out really stronger than before, I would say, which is great. And then, I think specifically on the international side, by refocusing on those core markets, the other thing that we've really found is those consumer preferences have become a little more localized. People haven't traveled for the last 2 years, so what we used to kind of employ as a blanket global strategy maybe isn't necessarily relevant for the UK in particular. So I think how it's changed the international strategy for us is, like I said, really kind of looking at that customer in a more localized way, and doubling down on the investments and building teams on the ground to support it is another kind of major pivot for us.
Got it.
Yeah,
did you see any of the local, like Elizabeth was saying, they started borrowing each other's product lines. Did you, as you guys were branching out into some new products, did you, oh, well, they're really loving this in the UK or some of the core, was there some learnings there?
Absolutely. So thankfully, well, one advantage of being primarily e-commerce and shipping fully cross-border is it's really a shared inventory pool for us. But we are able to look at our data and see kind of the way that purchases are differentiated by region. And by sharing those kind of regional insights with our product and design teams, we're able to become a lot more relevant for the local market. So and we're actually seeing, that's one of the major ways where we're seeing kind of localization expanding is on the merchandising side, and customers are buying different things in different regions, and really kind of leveraging that and the learnings we're pulling from that to inform things like content strategy, retail rollout, which we mentioned earlier, as well as kind of just which channels we sell into. So I think we're kind of trying to let the customer guide us a little bit in terms of how has the pandemic shifted the way that they shop.
So I'm going to stay with you here, Kellie, and kind of shift to our next topic so you can catch your breath while I give you some airtime here. But so, we mentioned earlier that global logistics is a huge part of what we're hearing. We came into this with like, okay, there's a new customer journey, let's figure it out. It's different from country to country, but in some ways, it's standardized at the same time, which is kind of this weird duality. But the one thing that we're seeing is to get closer to the customer, people are getting the product closer to the customer. And I know we talked a little bit about how you guys are looking at, revisiting fulfillment in Europe. So can you tell us a little bit, you put your professional logistics hat on now, but watch out because Casey's title already got changed from VP of International to like Director of 3P anyway, so.
Yeah, and I think for us, and Angela and I were just talking about this, but we're also a sustainable brand. So as we continue to expand international, we have to look at the carbon footprint of constantly shipping from Los Angeles into Europe. So as our European business is growing and the volume is increasing, definitely need to look at, just from a sustainability perspective, making sure that we're being really efficient on, not only cost, which is obvious, but also, the environmental cost. So that was really what grounded our decision in exploring this. But thankfully, there's obviously a bunch of ancillary benefits to that as well. As our kind of merchandising strategy is differentiating, it becomes just an obvious added benefit to be able to put the right product in that region, at the right time, such that we can actually kind of fulfill that differentiated demand in a way that feels more localized. So being able to offer local shipping options by being, kind of having that location and region is something that our customers have already expressed they value highly. So I think while sustainability is really at the core of that decision for us, there's so many consumer benefits as well, particularly as we start to see that differentiated consumer preference.
Yeah, it's funny how the increases in shipping and freight, and can refocus different
Yeah.
parts of the organization on
The cost savings
oh,
don't hurt
yes.
either.
It's like, this carbon footprint thing sounds really good. Angela, you talked a little bit about how you guys had made some changes with fulfillment into the Canadian market. I think you had shut it down and started over. Tell us a little bit about what you guys were seeing on the logistics front.
Yeah, so logistically, we had to, obviously, once we shut down the warehouse in Canada, we decided to ship from, our warehouse was in Southern Cal, so we had to ship from Southern Cal into Canada, which did create some challenges because our biggest markets in Canada were on the other side. We're in Toronto area, and not necessarily Vancouver as much. So, there's a lot of weighing and calculations when you're trying to making these decisions, like what's the right thing to do. At that time, because we were also closing several stores in Canada, it just seemed like the right thing to do. And then it really came down to what's the right pricing strategy. Canadians are used to seeing prices in a certain format when you talk about VAT and extra taxes, and making sure that we're covering that correctly, and still creating something that's profitable. So
Right.
I think there was a lot of math, a lot of charts, a lot of PowerPoints and evaluations, working with the logistics team, working with the retail team in Canada. Luckily, the taste of product was pretty similar to what's here in the US. They're another region that's used to a highly promotional strategy, unlike Europe and the rest of the world. So there were some synergies to really gain there. But then I think it really came down to like the cost. And so the cost of operating that warehouse was offset, even though it might cost us more money to ship it to the end consumer at the end of the day. So net, we still came out cash positive because of just the operational cost of having a freestanding 3PL in Canada.
Got it. And Elizabeth, you guys have always sold through partners and wholesale distributors around the world. How has that changed? And weigh in on the marketplaces as well, because I know we had some good conversations about marketplaces, and obviously depending on which marketplaces you sell through, that can kind of help get that product closer to the customer.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to cover off on marketplaces first, we are definitely leaning in and looking at with Amazon in particular, both in the UK, EMEA, and United States, what is the ecosystem of logistics solutions that we can partner with them in order to just get the most product in the most consumers' hands with the least amount of friction. So it does feel like their library of offering has definitely increased. With regard to consumer and wholesale, obviously I mentioned a lot of change, organizational shift. When it comes to DTC e-com, globally, we saw the opportunity to align on a shared service third-party platform for commerce and logistics. So we're able to see a little bit of those trends at a global and region level in buying and shopping, but also kind of that feedback and SLA expectation, and how we can then turn the dial on some of our logistics SLAs and how we can lean in. The way that we handle returns in the United States is different than we handle returns in SIL. And by rejoining and locking up, we've learned a lot from each other about how to service our unique customers, particularly in elite swim, and what their unique logistical requirements are around that, as well as their expectations with good and fair business practices around being sensitive to the environment. A technical elite race suit can be $600 and is a lot more difficult to get on than a pair of Spanx. And some of the materials are increasingly repurposed materials and circular ecosystem materials, but historically haven't been. So you can run through several of these in one season. And so how do we create that customer journey and that customer experience with logistical partners has been definitely a team effort to try and optimize.
Right. Zach, jump in if you've got anything to add on the global logistics front. Again, coming at it from a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we're not at the place yet that we would consider splitting our inventory or setting up a new fulfillment center outside of the one we have today. I think it's something we think about, and I think it would definitely, one of the biggest pain points in growing international right now for us is just the additional cost to pay for something with duties and taxes. And so thinking about, if you're located locally to the customer and you don't have to worry about duties and taxes to the customer, it's just, it's a lower price point, and I think, increases your conversion rate and you can market more towards them. And so I think it definitely helps open up a new growth lever, but we just feel like there's still a lot of room for us to grow domestically, that it's tough for us to justify setting up a new fulfillment center and then thinking about managing, different types of inventory and,
Right.
how do we, fulfill demand in one area versus the other.
Got it. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and we do like to pull questions in and things like that. What I want to talk about is we had a great conversation. Obviously a sustainable brand. Patagonia, maybe the all-time leader in some of those pursuits. I want to talk a little bit about social first, though, and I think one of the interesting things that we heard was, and you'll hear a little bit more about it in one of the following sessions, where at one point international media during the pandemic was cheap. We heard a lot of oh, we killed it because we could go buy cheap, but that seems like a distant memory now. So people are getting kind of squeezed at the top with media costs. Obviously, we talked about getting squeezed on the shipping and those margins disappearing. Social seems to be kind of coming to the rescue in some way. But we also talked about, we're kind of having to put a little more structure and process around social. Maybe Kellie, tell us a little bit about what you guys have been doing. And, I think it's a very interesting topic, and I'd like it to blend into sustainability as well, because I want to get that topic covered as well. So.
Well, I'll see if I can, your social media, you're
Social,
about,
yes.
So I'll see if I can blend social media
All right,
and sustainability. I don't know. That's a challenge. But yeah, no, on the social front, I think one of the things that we saw through the pandemic that's really stuck is the importance of user-generated content. And really, I sound like a broken record at this point, but really kind of leveraging our consumer and what she or he is kind of feeling and doing, and making sure that that is at the forefront of what our brand is representing. So we've seen a lot of success with that, and it's something that we've employed kind of now that we feel like we're out of the pandemic, and I think that will be a go-forward strategy for us. And then I think specifically one market I would call out is Canada, where we've seen just explosive growth by tapping into kind of that community leadership aspect and targeting kind of these more not influencers at all, just people in their community that, stand for something and really have a point of view, and really highlighting them. And we've just seen a lot of success engaging with our consumer in that way. It feels a little bit more personalized. And I think that that's resonated well in the land of just being flooded with Instagram ads. Like, it's becoming impossible to compete with other brands. So I think standing out in a more differentiated way has been really valuable for us, and I did not include sustainability in that.
We'll finish up with that one. So yeah, I throw you a curveball. Yeah. Angela, I know you guys have obviously got in your current job. Sustainability is kind of job one, always has been.
Absolutely.
What are you seeing? Especially as you look ahead, what are some of the social trends that we're seeing?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, because I think for Patagonia, because they are, when it comes to social and just even that expression with communities in the digital space, it's really leaned more towards the activism missions of the brand. So there's this healthy tension between anti-consumerism and growing the e-commerce business,
right,
and supporting saving the planet, which is our true mission. Our company statement is save the home planet. So that really is the first mission. So a lot of the activities you'll see in social are really about getting people involved in activism, getting involved in their local communities, environmental, and now a lot more into social issues as well, because that is obviously a big part of everyone's everyday life. So a lot of the energy we spend is on that. Patagonia took a stance against Facebook probably about 2 years ago. We haven't done any paid marketing in Facebook and Instagram in the last 2 years, which is now seems a little bit like a godsend compared to what some people are dealing with.
Right.
But at the same time, it limits our channels from a paid perspective. So really, my role now, I've been talking to the organization about how to really leverage, this Uber fan base. And when you talk about elite athletes, like you're talking about a swim, like you talk about mountain climbers, cyclists, all these different sports, a lot of elite athletes come to Patagonia for product that they know they can buy.
Right.
They can get it repaired for free. We want you to have that product forever. We want you to never have to replace it, as long as we can do that. So it's really about trying to connect all those dots and have those messages be present on the digital site and the .coms as well as in the social spaces, so people understand all the different facets of Patagonia. I think that's one of the greatest challenges. We just have our hands in so many.
It's true.
Not even repair, but also, you know, worn. We were one of the first companies to do worn wear, so recycled clothes, bring in your own clothes, we give you credit for something new. They've been doing that for almost 10 years now. But the connection between, do I buy it new, do I buy it used, do I get it repaired, all of that is a lot of messages on one platform. And so my goal is to try to make that a little more seamless and a little more effortless so we can really, you know, support the mission.
So I'm
of saving the whole
realizing I
planet.
forgot to put re-commerce in my my cloud of re. So.
Re-commerce is huge. I
But
mean,
yeah, let's talk a little bit about, kind of we'll merge the path ahead with, a sustainable path ahead. Elizabeth, anything to share on what you guys are doing from a sustainability perspective?
Yeah, we do have clean seas initiatives, and at the parent corporation level, for us, blending the topic of sustainability and social, which is tough. We've definitely spent the last year and a half looking at both our Team Speedo athletes as ambassadors
Right.
around ways that they authentically are making waves as individuals and not just professional or elite athletes. And we're featuring each athlete in a editorial calendar fashion that trickles down to some of our commerce channels like Ecommerce as well. This month we're featuring Abby Weitzel, and she's talking about re-economy. So she, outside of the pool, has side businesses where she basically reclaims furniture, restyles it, and reintroduces it into the economy. So Team Speedo is highly engaged and involved, and it's in parallel path with the rebuilt ambassador program that we've been spending the past year on consolidating and aligning the individuals that are welcome to participate and approved to participate in it with some of those ideals around fair business, sustainability, inclusivity, and all of the things that are around the brand pillars for the Speedo brand. And the ambassador program, we've actually increased the average engagement rate to over 16%. So we're very stoked on that. And we've been able to do that through telling stories that actually matter and resonate more to individuals that are around able-bodied in a lot of different topics. I won't go into it,
Right.
but sustainability is like a major one.
Yeah, and again, these panels are supposed to start the conversation. We could stay up here for another hour easily. So I encourage you guys to chat with our speakers. Zach, Rick's a bit of a fanboy of Public Rec. So Rick's our podcast host, and he was kind of like, oh, awesome. I'll wear my shirt. So I don't know if he's potentially an influencer for you guys or not, but
Yeah.
Anything else you guys are seeing, especially from a social, or you can try to mash up social and sustainability.
Yeah, I guess one thing that we talk about a lot internally is sustainability was not initially a part of our messaging. It's not something that our customers know us for. It just wasn't part of how the brand was built, and so we think it's important. We want it to be a part of the brand, and so we talk a lot about how can it be a part of the brand, and how can we do it where it still feels authentic. And we struggle a lot with okay, we could come out with a capsule that is recyclable fabric and talk about that and say we want to start moving towards this, but then we get worried about does the customer think we're doing this just to talk about it versus
Right.
This is something that we feel is important and we want to be doing more of it. And then the argument of it's okay if the customer thinks that this is still the right thing to do, let's just do it anyway. So I think for us, because it wasn't a part of the initial messaging, it's hard we're still thinking through how do we make it a part of our messaging and make it feel authentic. For the social part, the only thing I was going to add is that I think with the iOS, this is completely separate, but with the iOS update, I think it's been more difficult for us to track performance. And so
Right.
that's been a lot of what has changed for us is how do we think about return on ad spend, what are the right tools to be tracking it, and then to an ad level of like, not just, we spent this amount of money and we saw this amount of revenue, but which ad performed better than the other, which should we be, scaling into more. So that's become more challenging, and, we've been looking into more tools to track.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up here. Maybe time for one question. I know we want to get back on track here. So I'll tell you what, yeah, go ahead. And just feel free, shout it out, I'll repeat it.
Well, I'm pretty loud, so. You guys are talking about social. I'm curious how you think about the social messaging for domestic versus international.
I think everybody heard that. Go for it. Anybody want to go?
We're figuring it out, especially the international versus local. We are finding that we have campaigns that resonate internationally, but particularly in social, it has to be hyper-local. It has to be authentic, and we can't just take an image in London and have it actually resonate or feel right with somebody in Colorado. So we're figuring it out, and that's a lot where we're leaning in on those matrix teams, and we're testing a lot of different options.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say extremely challenging. Agreed. We're also figuring it out. What we found is it does need to be local. Absolutely. Yep. Content needs to be localized. For us, we also want to be hyper careful to not dilute the brand and dilute the message that we've worked so hard to create. So one thing that we have done to give you kind of a practical piece of it is, we feel pretty strongly that the content and creative team should all kind of sit together, but it needs to be kind of a global toolkit created such that each kind of regional team has strong input into what is created so that they have what they need to take to their market and speak to their customer specifically. So still working out exactly how that toolkit is created in an efficient way, but we feel pretty strongly about that kind of centralized message that then kind of gets employed globally. Awesome. Well, I'm going to thank you guys. Again, thanks for all the calls. And another is really authentic, whether it's being sustainable or on the e-commerce side. Quick thanks to the speakers, and I'm going to ask NJ and Rob to come on up. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Thanks again.